Hi, and welcome to the Brigham Young University Family History Library webinar series. My name is Sean Firmage. I will be your host for this webinar. As a reminder, our next webinar will be tomorrow at 6 p.m. and that will be with Bob Taylor. His presentation is LDS Topics in the Family History Guide. Also, before and after this presentation, you're welcome to fill out the polls. We don't have it down at the bottom of the screen. Just if you have any suggestions as to topics that we should cover next month, we'd love to hear those. Today we will be pleased to hear from Jong, who will be giving the presentation titled Finding Your Family in the Amazing Online Amsterdam City Archives. Johannes, or John de Jong, was born in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and is an accredited genealogist specializing in Dutch research. While on a 3-year assignment in Germany for the Procter & Gamble Company, he conducted research in over 50 German archives, discovering his wife's ancestral line back to 1675. This experience reignited his passion for family history, subsequently leading to a position with Family Search International, where he is currently leading records acquisition negotiations of the North American team, while continuing to seek out his own ancestors in all of his spare time. John and his wife are the proud parents of 5 children and 9 grandchildren spread throughout the United States. And John, we will go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going here, and we'll go through here. So just delighted to be able to talk about the Amsterdam City Archives. And some people may wonder, well, why Amsterdam and why is it so important? And that's because, let me get to the next slide here. Well, I'll tell you the reason in a second. So first of all, some presentation ground rules. We're all learning together. So I learn from people that I speak with all the time, and so if you have something that you'd like to share with us, that would be great. Please ask questions as we move along, and we'll try to answer them. If they're very long and require some significant discussion, we can answer those after class, or I've got my email on here. It's jdejong, the initial J, dejong at familysearch.org, and I'm happy to respond to questions about Amsterdam research specifically, or also research in the Netherlands in general. There's a huge amount of information just in this particular website, and so we're only going to be able to sample a couple of record types, and you'll see that as we go through. And we'll focus on the most genealogically relevant materials. Some knowledge of Dutch is helpful. We'll try to keep it in English as much as possible, but you'll see the website is in Dutch. And if you're using Google Chrome as your a way to get on the internet, you can use Google Translate to translate it. But the problem is when you do that, the results that come up will also be translated. So the names are actually translated. So John Young, or Jan de Jong becomes John Young, and so you might miss something there. So I think I would recommend just keep it in Dutch and then learn to deal with it. So why is Amsterdam important? Well, number one, I was born there. I love Amsterdam. It's a very interesting place. I left at the age of 8, was back there. I served a 2-year LDS mission in the Netherlands, was never stationed in Amsterdam, but it was in my zone, and I was able to visit my grandparents a number of times who were still living in the city at the time. Amsterdam's one of the most important ports in the 17th century. It was a huge city. It was like New York of that time period. People came in from all over the world to come to the city for various reasons. Economic. Sometimes they fled oppressive regimes and governments. The Huguenots fled for their lives, as many Jewish immigrants did as well. So it's a very cosmopolitan place, and it remains such today. So let's go to the archives. We're going to look at some of the records here. This is the actual vaults on the inside of the archives. Some pictures. I've not been there. I would like to go there. It looks like a fascinating place, but having been there online, I'm amazed at the amount of material they have. The website is www.amsterdam.nl/Staatsarchief, and this will take you, this is approximate what the homepage looks like. And as you look at the right-hand side, Archiefbank is what you click on to get to the indexes. And then we will go through the indexes in this presentation. There are about 50 kilometers of records. They are all indexed with attached images, and the images are free as of the beginning of this year. So prior to this time, you needed to pay for them to actually see an image, but today you can see them for free. And it's really the most comprehensive indexed record collection of any major city in the world. They have births indexed, for example, from 1565 to 1811. Family Search is indexing the births between the civil registration period, which is 1811, until about 1940, and I think that project is a little bit over 90% complete. If you want to do some indexing, that would be a great help to finish the project, get it over the finish line. When that's done, the births for Amsterdam will be indexed all the way from 1565 to 1940. There's no other major metropolitan city in the world that has that kind of record coverage. So it's an amazing place. There are 32 different record collections, all of them indexed with free images. And so as you can see here, there's a kind of an overview, which is what Overzicht means, of each of them. I've got this translated. The first column there said Zoek, which means to go search. Voorbeeld is an example, and Handleiding are the instructions, basically telling you about that collection and how it works and what's involved, and etc. This is a translation. We actually have a handout that's also part of this session that you can access, which then gives you the translation of the different record types that are included in this collection. And again, we're going to only cover a couple of them. So we're going to talk about indexes a little bit, and what I also believe are the most powerful genealogical record collections in this set, and maybe the simplest and the ones to use to start out with, and then you can start working on the more complex problems that you might have. So I call this the A list. So pre-1811, it's the dope registers, or which are the baptismal registers. Ondertrouw, which is the marriage banns, or excuse me, when people were preparing to be married, they had to go in and register either at the civil registration or with the church, and for 3 weeks their names would be either posted on the city hall or announced at church on Sunday. After that 3-week period of time, if nobody objected, then the marriage could go on. If there were objections, and there could be various reasons for that, then there were considerations made. I've had some family members I've found that actually, and we'll see an example of this a little bit later, that they were rejected, and so it stopped the process, and then 2 weeks later they were re-registered and subsequently were married after that. So whatever problem they had, which wasn't made clear, was resolved, and they were able to move forward. We have the begraaf registers, which are burial registers from same time period. You can see this. Membership of the Doopsgezindenkerk, which is these are folks that believed in adult baptisms, and so you don't have baptisms of babies, and it changes the way that you might look at these records and the kind of research that you might do. So again, those records are in there. After 1811, there are bevolkingsregisters, which are population registers, and they're in 3 different time periods, as you can see. The interesting thing is that while it starts in 1851, you can look up people that were born much earlier. So it's not when you were born. It's actually the date you register yourself with your family, and then your birth information is there. So where you were born and your birth date. And each of these they're kind of like family sheets, whoever's living under the roof at that time. So it gives you a good idea of the family. Now, if there's a cousin in there, or if there's some other close family members, you may have to tease that out. But it's a good way to start in trying to figure out who's in the family. Tijdelijk verblijf means a temporary, they were there temporarily. And gezinskaarten are family cards. So after 1893, they created these family cards, which are similar in content and have the head of household, spouse, and children. And if there's no spouse, whoever the head of household happens to be. Overgenomen delen are also similar and the same type of thing. So we may or may not have time to be able to go through some of those. So there's also some interesting collections. There's police reports. In the bottom right-hand side, you can maybe make this out. It says Johannes Cornelis Heuperman. Happens to be my grandfather who had his bicycle stolen. And I found this in these police reports. It talks about how much the bicycle's worth. It was his favorite bicycle, and the location that it was stolen. So some interesting things there. There's passports. On the left-hand side is a brother of my grandfather's. This picture we did not have, and I was totally surprised to find this and subsequently attached that to his record in the family search tree. The Waterloo lists are lists of soldiers that that served in the army against Napoleon at Waterloo and their payments that they received. And then there's some confession papers, and this one I pulled up happens to be a sad little story about these guys that took this little boy who was selling candy on the street, took him around the corner and took all of his money. So you get some interesting different record types that are there. You just hope your family doesn't end up in the confession papers, but everything's possible that way. Obviously, there's some challenges. Language is Dutch. Dutch can be difficult, and the handwriting styles prior to the 1700s can get really difficult. So and it just requires some learning. The Family Search website has got a great wiki under the Dutch materials that also provides some coaching and training on reading old handwriting and some of these earlier handwriting styles. And so with practice, it can get easier. I know some people can read it really easily. I struggle still, particularly with the really old stuff, but you can tease out the information that you need to as you become more familiar with the records. So we make the impossible possible. And we'll talk a little bit about some search techniques and then spelling and wildcards on these indexes. We're going to get a chance to look at the website live and do some practicing towards the end of this. And we're just going to go through some of these principles before we do that. So how to use the index. So some tips and tricks. First of all, begin with a broad search and then narrow it based on your results by maybe adding a date or more precise spelling. Secondly, you want to understand variant spellings. The spelling of names was not really locked in until the late 1800s. There's lots of different variants, and we'll talk through some of the experiences that you have when you look at that and how different names can be spelled different ways. A lot of that has to do with a number of different reasons. Using wildcards. So the star, which is above the 8, stands for either no letters or multiple letters. And so you can put that in, and it gives you lots of variety of types of things you'll find. The question mark stands for only one letter. So, for example, you can use multiple stars in one search. So BA star K star R will give you 3 different, probably a lot more examples, but these are 3 that we just came up with. You'll also see the word ongeveer, which means approximately. So there, if you put in bakker, then you'd also get bakker with a C, or bikker, something that sounds alike. So it's kind of like a Soundex type system, and they've taken names that sound similar and even some that are not quite similar, but that may have been misindexed, or that people think, oh, this could have been this name, and they put those variations in the results. So it's a way for you to expand what you're trying to look for. And then tussenvoegsels, a word about tussenvoegsels. My name has one, D-E, de, which means the, so I'm really John the Young. And as you know, in Dutch, VAN is a tussenvoegsel, which means from. So John van Eindhoven would be John from Eindhoven, or van der or van Dane. There are a lot of different prefixes that are used, and I use those as a filter. So when we look at what we're doing as a search in Dutch, only the last portion of the surname is used in the search generally. There are a couple of exceptions, but generally. So if you have a standard prefix, they go in the middle as a tussenvoegsel. Here's a couple of other things on the index. So de Jong, some examples. Standard de Jong. Then you've got just Jong. Sometimes they just leave the tussenvoegsel out. Or de with the apostrophe, Jong. Or de Jong with an H, or de Jonge with an E. Or then you got a whole bunch of different bakkers. Or Hopperman. Hopperman, Hopperman, Hemperman. The Hemperman is interesting because it's an M, and obviously the person didn't say Hemperman. They said Hopperman, but maybe the person who was writing it, their U looks like an M, and could look like an N. So there are letters that might look similar when they're written that the indexer messes up and indexes them incorrectly. And so then you get Hempermans, you get Hopperman with two P's. That's just what the clerk did. Hopperman, which is the German version with the umlaut. And Hopperman also comes with two N's. Hopperman, Hopperman. Interestingly, that particular family had a branch that moved to Australia, and one of the clerks closed the U. So a closed U looks like an A, so then the name became Heeperman. So there's a whole branch of Heepermans in Australia who are actually Hoppermans, but it seems like once the clerk does something, then from that henceforth and forever, the name has been changed. And we've got the reasons here why that happens. So some tips and tricks on how to use the additional tricks here. Using multiple search fields or filters. So searching under two names, you'll probably get a better result by entering two different fields rather than one. For example, you find more if you search under a surname and a date rather than a given name and a surname, or two different people, put their names in, you'll get a better result, more likely to get the results you want than taking the one person and filling out their name entirely. I like to search under the least common name. It gives me fewer hits and fewer things to go through, and more likely to kind of get to who I need to get to. And the index itself does not have a surname for the children. So for children, you need to have the surname of the father or mother, and then you would put in the given name of the child, or if you have that, or you put in the surname of the father and the mother, and then you might find their children. There's a number of different variants there, but don't expect to put in the surname and then a given name for a child and expect to find their parents. That won't happen. Using dates as a limiter is another way to kind of limit the results that you're getting so that you don't get all 400 years of results. You're limiting to the 20 or 30 years that you think that the event may have happened for your particular ancestor. You can use addresses in the bevolkingsregister, which is the population registration. And that way you can put in just an address and you can see who lived in that particular location over the entire period of this registration time. And you can kind of see people move in and move out. And it's a way maybe to see if a home stayed in the family or not, and see who else may have lived there. And the website provides a way for you to provide them with changes, errors that you might see, and changes that you would like them to make to the indexes. So let's talk first about the baptism registers. from 1564 to 1811. This contains a lot of different churches. Now, the biggest churches at that time period in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, or the Dutch Reformed Church, Catholic Church is huge. There's quite a few. Waalse or the Huguenots are there, and then you've got a bunch of others. There's one group of, we had a question earlier about Jewish folks. So there is the Portuguese church is in there. The German Jews are not. So they're working on that. I think the problem is that they're in Hebrew, and that was one of the issues that they had with that. So, and it's got a register of the Regiment Oranje-Nassau from 1785 to 95. So it's quite a large collection. And this is what it looks like. So when you get to the baptism registers, it's got 4 different sections that you can enter the information in for the person you're searching. So first of all, the top one is the given name is the achternaam, which means the last name. Tussenvoegsel, I leave that blank typically. And then voornaam, which is the given name of the person. And you notice it's got ongeveer on both sides of the achternaam and the voornaam, meaning that I could put Jong, J-O-N-G, and hit ongeveer, and I'm going to get these different variants of de Jong. And it might give me more variants than I might want. And so I unclick the ongeveer, and then I just use wildcards to separate the areas where the name might vary, and it restricts some of the results I might get. The second one is searching on a date. I don't think I've used the actual day and month because they tend to not be very accurate, but you can, and you can really nail it to try to be very specific. I usually put, depending on what I'm trying to do, if I have an idea of when somebody was born, I'll give them maybe a 3 or 5 year leeway on both sides of their anticipated birth date. And you can just put in the year. So you just put in the year on the first box, and then the box below is the second. So between 1873 to 1883 would be a way to do that. Notice that all 4 of these boxes have got a roll, and it says kies, which means to choose. So if you leave it at kies, it gives you all the different roles that are there. So it's father, mother, witness, and other. And so doing that gives you the greatest flexibility. If you're looking for a child, for example, then what you might do is you put the last name of the father or mother, and then you choose father or mother, depending on what it is. And then for the child, when you look at 2 names at a time, so that's the second green bar, it says searching at 2 names at the time, you would put in the given name of the child, and then you would choose kind, which is child, and then that would give you then your results. Overige gegevens are other results. I've not used that. It could be used. You can't. There's some limitations on using it, what you can do with it, but it's not as useful as the other 3 tools. So as you can see, you can only search on one name when you choose other. So again, some limitations. So how to search them? So here's an example. First of all, step 1, click on Zoek. So Zoek then brings up this page where you get all 4 of these things. And what we did is we put in loodgieter. Now, interestingly, before 1811, there's only one loodgieter in all of Amsterdam. And loodgieter, as you know, is a plumber. And I just find that fascinating. I would think that there would be more than one person with the last name of plumber, but that didn't happen. And it gives you the birth date, or the baptism date that this person was baptized. When you click on the toon resultaat, which means show result, then you get this next line here, which you can then hover over that, and it will show you the index that was created on the right-hand side. So in this case, Christian Loodgieter is the father, and he had a child, Fransijntje, who was baptized on the 24th of September, 1769. remember, all dates start with the smallest increment first. So it's day, month, year. So as it builds up. So you'll always have kind of a European fashion. This is pretty clear, but if you have 12/9/1769, that's not December 9th. That would be the 12th of September. So don't make that mistake. And it gives you the church, so the Nieuwe Kerk, the religion, so they're Dutch Reformed, Hervormd. Name of the father, name of the mother. Notice there's a tussenvoegsel there, T-E-N. So Magdalena Tendal, and then a witness, Lucas Tendal, and then another witness, Anatje Berkenpas. Pay attention to the witnesses. Good genealogical practice. Those people could be relatives. It's likely that Lucas is either Magdalena's brother or her father, or sometimes their grandfather, but that's a long time to live in the 1700s. But that will give you the information. Now, what I do with this, I highlight this entire little box. I just take my mouse and I highlight it, and then I copy and paste that into my notes for my particular individual that I'm adding into the tree. I have a software program I use to track everything, and for each individual I'll put notes and I put that in. And then I also go to the top of the page and I copy the URL number so I can quickly come back to that particular person's situation. You'll notice also there's a little teeny postage stamp here, and when you click on that you actually see the image. So we'll do that when we get to it. Here's another thing to watch out for, and this again gets into spelling. The spelling thing is really, really important to understand because you will miss people. You will miss children, you will miss parents, you will miss just generally people if you don't pay close attention to the various ways that names are spelled. This is a family, it's one of my families that I was researching, and notice here we have the last name of Korteling, and the given name, I wasn't sure what they were doing with Hartman because it could be a lot of different things, so I just said, okay, H-A-R with the star, and then the role of father. So I get every situation, and it turns out they're pretty consistent with Hartman. It's Hartman every single time for each of these births, and then Korteling with a K. And the wife's name here is Cornelia van der Sijs. And you notice there's also a Jacoba van der Sijs, so probably some other family member. Now, how do you know that you found all the children? Well, looking under van der Sijs, you remember van der Sijs was with an S? Well, now it's with a Z. And so there's actually a couple ways to van der Sijs, and there was some additional kids there because in this case, Hartman Korteling is spelled with a C and not with a K. So there were some children that were missed, that would have been missed if we were just looking at the K spelling of Korteling. Notice also that I only searched on one name, the father or the mother, and then came up with whatever results there were. Again, it gave me the broadest possible number of results. If I were to put both father and mother in at the same time, it would limit it. And in this case, if I would think, oh, I'll put Harman Korteling with a K, not thinking, not having the presence of mind that the K sound is also a C, I would not have found these other children. So that's just something to keep in mind. So another way is to put, in this case, where Zeiss and Zeiss, S or a Z, can sound the same. Putting a star at the beginning is another way to solve that problem. Okay. So the final thing is you can view the image. So clicking on that little postage stamp, going back to our original, this is the actual book. You'll notice at the top here, Fransijntje is the name, and it's got her date of baptism, Nieuwe Kerk Hervormd, Christian Loodgieter, then her mother's name, the witnesses. So everything that's indexed in that index kind of shows up at the top bar. And then it's got the actual image in color. And then you can also zoom in, and we see here 24th of September. Christian Loodgieter, Magdalena Tendal, and then their daughter Fransijntje, and then you have the witnesses. So these are really nice, well written, easy to read. They're not always that way, but it's amazing how many are. So a couple of watchouts and some learnings. So between 1564 and 1701, there's only the names of the child and parents, no witnesses or pastor. Between 1701 and 1811, all the data, including marginal notes, are included in the index. So those are all indexed, and that marginal notes can show up into the other portion. There's also birth dates included in 1792 to 1811, so you've got both birth and baptism dates. Twins are recorded twice, once alphabetically under the name of one child, and then again with the second. And then the spelling we talked about earlier, depending on how the registrar may have understood the name. I joke about it could be, your ancestor had a cold, and so their name sounded differently that day than it may have sounded any other day, and so you end up with a different spelling. Or you get different registrars who have a different spelling technique. And then using patronyms in searching for children. Now, we haven't talked about patronyms, and I think we'll talk about that in a little bit. So patronymics, as you may know, is the practice of using the father's first name as the surname of the children. And this is done in two ways depending on sex, but not consistently. It is consistent for the boys. So if the father's name was Jan, then the son's name could be Janssen or Jansen, meaning the son of Jan. If it's a girl, Rebecca could be then Rebecca Janssens dochter, which means the daughter of Jan, or they just put Jansson with two S's, and so there's just a little bit of inconsistency. So, and I think we see that in the Norwegian or the other Scandinavian type records as well, the late 1800s. You get very precise with dochter and zoon, or daughter and son, or daughter and son, and then it gets a little muddy, and the son ends up being the ending that you see. In the Amsterdam records, depending on family, you start running into patronyms in the mid-1700s, some later, many of them earlier, and the earlier you go, the more patronymics you'll see. And initially, you'll see maybe three names. You'll see a given name, a patronymic, and then you'll see a surname. So it could be Jan Berendsen Schipper. So Berend was his father's name. Schipper means to be a sailor. It would be the last name. So Jan Berendsen Schipper. And you'll be searching, and all of a sudden you'll just see Jan Berends, and you don't see the Schipper part. So you may end up having to look when you're back in that time period and you have this situation with patronymics, that you'll want to look under both Jan Berends as a surname, and Jan Schipper as a surname, and sometimes they will combine them and it'll be Berendsen-Schipper, and so your search needs to include both the patronymic as well as the surname. A bit tricky. Take some practice. Don't forget about it, because you might lose names, lose people that if you're not using that index correctly. The other fun letter in Dutch is the I, which they're proud of, and it's IJ that's connected. You can't look for the J alone. If it's an I, they don't separate those letters. And it's used more frequently in the past, and it can be used in different ways. We've got a couple of examples here for Bruin and Bruin, where the IJ and the I are there, or even Jan and Jan, where it's used as the beginning of the name John. So it's something just to be aware of. It's an odd thing they do with the name, and you can tell it's an I because it'll be an I and a J, and it'll have dots over it. Now, some people are lazy and they forget to, or they just don't put the dots there, even though it should be an IJ. And so people will index that as a Y, and other people will index that as an IJ. And so that's something else that will happen when you're looking at that letter as you're trying to find that particular name. So if you're looking under Bruin and somebody indexed it as a Y instead of an IJ or an I, you will get different solutions. Way to get around that, as you've probably already guessed, is to do BRU and then star N, and that will give you all three of those kind of possibilities. So contractions are another thing that happens in the records. So Johannes can be J-O''E-S, W''M for William, Fred K for Frederick, etc. So they'll, if you're familiar with the names, you can kind of see that. The correct name is Johannes. Here are the differences in the baptism registries. You can see the different time period and the more information as you go on. So just an example. So what's included, as we've been talking about in the document but not in the index, are name changes, providing of baptismal certificates or important functions of parents and or witnesses in civic government. So they may, if it's the mayor, it'll say it's the mayor. After 1792, the birth date was required. You get the names of the parent, the names of the witnesses, name of the child, no surnames, remember, and the pastor's name. Now let's talk about the marriage banns. We've talked about this a little bit. I watch movies once in a while, and somebody be getting married, and they'll say the pastor will be up there. If anybody has any objection here, speak now or forever hold your peace. And about 3 seconds go by, and then he continue. Well, 3 seconds was 3 weeks, a couple hundred years ago, and they would go through this whole process. So there's an entire book about marriage and family in the Netherlands in the 17th and 18th century by Donald Hux, who then explains a lot of this stuff. Why were there marriage bans, or why were these Ondertrouw registers there? It's because the Roman Catholic Church started this at the Council of Trent, 1563. Two primary reasons: determining parentage and keeping track of members. And then after 1578, the Protestants followed the same practice. It's also helpful to make sure that if somebody didn't already father a child with another woman, that those things would be brought to light and resolved in some amiable fashion. It was also the custom of the day is that sometimes a guy would promise himself to a woman to be married to her, and then would back out of the promise and then decide to go get married to somebody else, and you'd have this public document out there, this declaration he was going to marry this other person, and then the initial young lady would come forward and register a complaint, and then they would have to go through a process of resolving that. So there were some other reasons why they did this. So basically two types of Ondertrouw registers: the Dutch Reformed Church or German Reformed Church. This series of marriage intentions runs from 1578 to 1795. And again, it's the marriage would take place within a 3-week period. It is not the marriage date. It is the date of the registration. And sometimes on that registration, it'll show you the date that they were married. At other times, you need to go to the marriage registers and find the actual marriage. But you'll know that it's within a 3-week period, so you can kind of find it, look for it that way. And the second one was with the civil registration. Basically, that's everybody that was not Dutch Reformed, or that both the husband and the wife or the bride and groom were Dutch Reformed. If it's a mixed marriage with one person belonging to that church and somebody else belonging to another church or not churched at all, then it would be in the city hall. And it was solemnized by the alderman or schepenen at the city hall. And so these registers run from 1581 to 1795. After 1795, after June of 1795, they were all combined and they were in the same group until civil registration started in 1811. So just some background information. People may not have married in Amsterdam. They could have been too closely related. They could have been engaged to somebody else. There may have been a baby on the way with somebody else. There are different reasons why you may not see them there. Marriage could have occurred in another location, or they just didn't complete the process. The same sorts of boxes are used in the Ondertrouw registers as in the baptisms. So you'll see the same type of thing. You can choose. You have the approximate type thing going on. And here's a couple of examples. So here's one with multiple spellings. So we have here Hopperman. So these are all the Hoppermans that are married between 1771 to 1785, it looks like. 86, 87, 91. So they're kind of mixed up. They're alphabetical. And as you see, hovering on the item itself, we end up with two spellings of the actual register. So there's the date that they got, that the registration took place, and then the name of the bridegroom, David Hupperman, O umlaut with P-P-E-R-M-A-N, and then the name that is David Hupperman. And so, the reason for that is, I think, pretty clear when you look at this actual record. So David, the clerk, writes the part at the top. So he says, David Hopperman from Hamburg, 28 years old, and the street that he lives in. His parents are dead. He was assisted by his brother Hendrik Hopperman, and then the en passant. So and Geertij Munink, that's his wife-to-be, from Osnabrück. She's 21 years old. She lives in the Kerkstraat. Her parents are also dead, and she was assisted by her niece, Johanna Rukam. And then you have his signature and then her mark. So apparently she didn't know how to write. So you see the difference. This is something that's really critical in finding further ancestors, because who would know that Hopperman, H-E-U-P-E-R-M-A-N, actually comes from Hopperman, because that's how he signed his name. So when the Dutch clerk heard him pronounce his name, he spelled it H-E-U, and when he actually signed his name, it's A-O umlaut, P-P-E-R-M-A-N, and then Germany, Hamburg, Germany is where he came from. So you go to Hamburg to go find those records and look under Hopperman instead of Hopperman. So what if things didn't work out? Actually, in the index itself, it says Akte doorgehaald, which means that they've scratched through the record. This is what it looks like. So this particular situation, that was not allowed to continue because they were too closely related to each other. And there's a note on the left-hand side here that actually explains what the relationship is and what was going on. And I'm not quite sure why it's a problem, because it was actually one guy marrying two sisters. So I don't know why that's a problem, but apparently they thought it was one at the time. So they were not allowed to marry. Names may have been duplicated in the registers. So if the signature, like we just saw with Hopperman and Hopperman, that could have happened. If the marriage intention wasn't completed and had lines drawn to, like my example I'd mentioned earlier of my family, where 2 weeks later they did go through the whole process and they were married at that time. Or if one couple wasn't in the Dutch Reformed Church, but they were both then registered in the Dutch Reformed Church register as well as the PUI register, which that's the other way that you would find them. So you'd find them twice. So what do we learn? Well, we learn the bride and groom, their age and birthplace, as we just saw with Hopperman, and we learn if this was their first marriage, because it says young man or young daughter, young lady. So in order to find that, you have to find their first marriage. So when they're subsequently widowed, they are not widows or widowers. There's no age or birth location, and typically no birth location information. Sometimes it's there, but you miss out on that. So you have to kind of track the person back. They will show the name of their initial or their previous marriage. So I've had people that have been married multiple times, and so they said there was the widower of somebody, and then you go look for that marriage, he's the widower of somebody, and then you go look for that marriage, and that was his first marriage, and that's then the place where you find his birthplace and birth date, or not birth date, but age. So it's a bit tricky. You have to kind of follow the trail. And there are witnesses for the bride and groom. This is the beauty of this record. This differs significantly from the actual marriage records. If you look at the marriages, you'll just see the bride and the groom marrying each other on a particular date in a particular location, and that's typically all you'll find. There may be some exceptions, but typically that's it. In this case, this has a witness that comes, and you saw in the example we showed, the witnesses were a brother and a niece. About a third of the time, the witnesses are one of the parents, sometimes both, but usually one of them. And also, it could be another family member, like we witnessed, or some other friend or person that, I don't know if they're walking down the street and, hey, we need a witness over here, and come in for the marriage. But this is just a great tool that you can use to go back another generation as you try to find your family. There's also a helpful tool. It's the Amsterdam Records City Index. And so this is the website it's at. It's also on the handout so that you can look this up. Someone has gone through both the notarial records and the marriage, these Ondertrouw records, and looked at all the city names and spelled them the way that they are, the old name, and then what the new name is, what the current modern name is for that particular place. Now, it's in Dutch, the new name, so you're going to get a different spelling than you would the English version or the anglicized version of those names, but it gives you an idea of where they came from. So here are I guess there's three examples here, three different ones. So you have Aachen, A-A-C-E-N, which is in these marriage records, which is then Aachen in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, and then Aachen, A-A-C-H-E-N, which I think is how they spell it today. Again, Onder Aachen, and then a notarial record example, which is the same, and then Aachen with a K, same story. So this is a really long book. It's down. You can download it. It comes from this Amsterdam Records, and I found it very useful in being able to figure out. If I can't figure it out from just looking at it and saying, "Oh, what is this?" then I refer to this, and it will tell me where it is, and usually where the international records might be found. So we're going to go through a quick example here of searching. So let's go to the website. Whoops. And I hope everybody can see this. So we are on the home page for Amsterdam. We're going to go to the Archiefbank here. And you'll see they've got a bunch of advertising and things that they do. Interesting. This is, oh good. So this takes just a second. Sometimes they got a hiccup. Then you go to the indexes in the middle. And that takes us right here to the indexes. And trying to keep it simple, I thought, well, let's look in baptisms here and see if we can find any baptisms for de Jong. So we put in de Jong. We know that it could have an E or an H on the end. Notice there's already 8,000 results. That's a nightmare to have to go through. Let's type in Johannes. Now that we're down to 115, so that's a lot more usable. And when I first did this, I thought, well, it's interesting. I just want to see how many Johannes de Jongs there are. Notice that there's a couple of Johannes Jongs. So somebody left. Either that's really young, but I doubt it. I think if you'd find their kids or you'd find their marriage or other other records relating to that individual, they'll have the DE back on, but that happens. Then there's Johannes Jongbloed, and what surprised me, or what I was looking at, I thought, well, this is the strangest thing down here, is this Jongbroeders, Banraad. So we now have two last names, two surnames here. So this is different than a tussenvoegsel, which comes between these little marks here. There's no tussenvoegsel, so that's the entire last name. And I thought, okay, well, let's look at one of these and see. Now, we have to click on Toon Resultat. So notice also that it says enzovoort, which means and so on. So there are more results than just the ones we have here. So we click on Toon Resultat, and we'll get the results. Now at any time, you can go back here to voorbeeld or handleiding up in the upper right. And as we scroll down, you'll see different names. Dutch names are great, very creative. So let's look at Hendrik here. So Hendrik, hang on a second, remove something. Okay, Hendrik was born or baptized in 1787, and he's got a mother, Johanna Maria Stickers. There's a witness, Hendrik Sticker, no S, and Femmetjes Sticker is another witness. And then, so there's this question, first of all, that pops to my mind is, okay, what's the real last name, Sticker or Stickers? And then let's find out more about Hendrik. So we can actually look at the record here and try to find him. And we have to zoom in a bit to find Hendrik. So we can look on the left-hand side is the name. Oh, here he is. So Hendrik. And then you have V for father, and then M for moeder or mother. And you see here the G means getuige or witness. You see here one witness, Hendrik Sticker, and then N, which is and, Femmetjes Sticker. And then I really question whether that's really Stickers with an S. I think that's Sticker with a blob. Is ink. You must have, it's one of these split pens, and maybe the nibs split or something like that, and one nib went one way and the other nib went the other way. I have no idea, but this looks like Sticker is really the last name. But you can't discount it. Maybe it becomes Stickers in another record. So. Another way to look at that is to look further down the page and see if there's any other places where this is the classic if I'm learning to index type of thing. And is there another name that's similar that may have an RS or something? Or what does he do with an S? Here's an S at the end of an M. Here we go. Here's an Aaltje Kramers RS. So this is a much different look than what happened with that R that was indexed as an RS. So again, it creates some doubt in my mind. You go back to the website here. It says terug naar de website. So notice the Dutch word website here. The Dutch invented the internet, something like that. Now we found that, we found this particular birth. Let's see if we can find the marriage of Johannes Jacobus Jongbroeder Banraat. So I like to open up a second page. And I do that just because then I can flip back and forth between the two indexes, the marriage index and the birth index. It's just a little simpler. So we go down here to ondertaal registers. Again, you can choose zoek, voorbeeld, or handleiding. We're going to go zoek right here. And we can put in the name. So we're looking for Banraat. Whoops. There's a T. But it was Jongbroeder Banraat. So Jong, let's go like that. Here we go. Johannes Jacobus Jongbroeder Banraat. So notice we were able to use that star there, and we have here the marriage record or the ondertaal record here. Johannes Jacobus Jongbroeder Banraat, 28/4/1785. And here's his wonderful bride, Johanna Maria Sticker. No S this time, so that may be the correct way to do it. And we click on the image and see what we can find. Now, typically there will be 6 to a page, and one of these will be the person we want. And the question in my mind is the last name really Jongbroeder Banrat, or is it Banrat without the Jongbroeder? So notice there's a couple things going on here. So we have his, we have his signature down here, and he's using Johannes with an S, Jacobus with an S, and a Jongbroeder with an R here. So he's contracting these names, and then his surname he's written out complete, and he really wants to make sure that people know that that's his surname. And then you have Johanna Maria Sticker, who does not have an S on there. And what else do we have? So Johannes Jacober Jongbroeder Banrat van Amsterdam, so from Amsterdam. And this van Amsterdam, that can be van Amsterdam as it's written out here. It could be van A, just the A, van A. Somebody doesn't have enough ink in his pen or something. Or A, I've seen A, AM, AMS, maybe AMST, but that's, and then Amsterdam written out. So you'll see variants of this. Let's see if we can see one here. Oh, that's Voorhout. So this guy was pretty, here we go, Van A. So there are just different things that people do. And then she is also from Amsterdam. And notice that they have their age from Amsterdam, Dutch Reformed. He's out, meaning old, 27 years. And then where he lives, his mother, Catharina Geertrui Jongbroeder. Ah, that's a clue. So if his last name was Jongbroeder Banrat, then the mother of just Jongbroeder is kind of interesting. It says niet present, not present. And over on the left-hand side, it says his mother's consent was brought in. So they had something, piece of paper probably that had that. Then you see her name, and then she's Dutch Reformed. She's 22 years old. The street she lived in, and then she was assisted with her father, Hendrik Sticker. So great record here. Gives you a good clue on where they lived, and and also where they came from, what their age was. And the next step that you might want to do, now that you have a mother and a father's name, is to try to figure out, okay, so let's see if we can find their birth. So we have Catharina Geertrui Jongbroeder. So we can go back to the baptisms here, and we can put Catharina and Jongbroeder, and we're going to look at Jongbroeder. And what do we find? So, we have Catharina Geertrui Jongbroeder as a witness here. The father, Johannes Jacobus Jongbroeder, and then the witness. So a witness, Catharina Geertrui is a witness, and the Hendrik Sticker is the other witness. Remember, Hendrik Sticker is an important fellow. We could look under Banrat and see what we find, and see if we have his father there. Now there's only 21 results here, and again, let's see what we can find here. So we're Ondertrouw. He was 27 years old in 1785. So that would be, if it's 25, that would be 60, so 58 approximately. So 1758. So who was born approximately 1758? Well, here we have one, 1757. But it's Johannes. Okay, so here we go. 1757. Johannes Jacobus Jongbroeder, and the father Jacobus Banrat, and the mother Geertrui Jongbroeder. So let's zoom in on that and look at that, and this may solve our problem. So I see right here, here is on Sunday the 27th, this is the Domine, so this is the pastor. And this is November, so notice the 9 and the V, so that's November. And then you have Jacobus Banderat. Here's another thing about spelling. So you've got Banderat with a DT, and of course we've looked at Banderat with a T. Geertrui Jongbroeder, so father, mother, and then they named their son Johannes Jacobus Jongbroeder. So they gave him the name Johannes after Johannes Banderat, who's probably the grandpa, Jacobus after his father, Jongbroeder after his mother's maiden name, and then of course his last name is Banderat. Maybe the indexers mistook this little blop on the J as a comma, and so they indexed that as a part of a last name, part of the surname. But that's not the case. So this is really a Banderat. So good example of the type of thing going on here. So I think did we have some questions here? Okay, not yet. Okay. Now, the next step you could do is you could say, well, I want to go look at the marriage of these two parents, Jacobus Banderat and Geertrui Jongbroeder, and try to find that. One way to do that is to go back here. We'll go back to the website, and let's try to put both names in. So we'll put BANR star, and we can choose, this is the bridegroom. We don't have very many. We could also add his wife-to-be, and let's put her first name here. There's a G, and see what we find. So show the result, and we have two. We have a Geertrui Jongbroeder with an earlier wife, Treintje Volkers. Aha. And then we have another one, Anna Geertrui Riethorst. So he's been married several times. So 1752 was one. And then you could start then, from this particular record, we are not going to get his information for his birth and age, as we can see. So this is Jacobus Banderat marrying Geertrui Jongbroeder. She's from Solingen, which is in Germany. She looks like she's 34. And this is her first marriage. Her parents are dead. She's assisted by her nephew, Abraham Roth. And then his name, Jacobus Banderat, notice that this time no D, T, only the T, van A.M., Amsterdam. And then it says he was widowed. Treintje Volkers was his previous wife, where he lives. And then on the left side here, that his wife is the death of his wife's, proof of his wife's death was submitted, so that he is not a bigamist. So that's kind of working through some of these records. And we could just keep going here, but you can see now, as you then look through the other marriages that he's had, we're going to get to his initial marriage. It's going to show maybe his parents in there, and you can keep looking, and it just keeps going on and on. It is the most amazing experience in my life to be able to find my ancestors and see the actual records in color and their signatures when they've got them. It makes me really feel connected to them. It's just it's a lot of fun. Let's go to the website, and to the PowerPoint. So some key learnings that we got from the Ondertrouw records. The last name Banderat was actually the last name. It wasn't those two names. There were several spelling variants that were evident that we could see. We found the parents in the Ondertrouw records. We also found the age and birthplace, spelling differences, And you could look for other family hints by reviewing all the returns. So if you just keep looking and using the star as the limiter really helped with all the spelling variants. So this is the first part of the presentation that's finished. We actually have an extra credit portion here if we have some time. So how much time do we have left over?
We do have a couple minutes if you'd like. There was one question just about the birth records after 1811. They were just wondering if there are birth records there.
Yes, so the civil registration period from 1811 goes 1811 to about 1940 was it was demanded by Napoleon that everybody be registered civilly and not in the church anymore. And so those records exist. Family Search has all of them on its website. So you can just go search under the catalog, look under Amsterdam, and look under the civil registration for that time period, and then go to the birth records. It's a big city, so it'll take you a long time to find somebody. But Family Search is in the process of completing the index. And if you know the name of your person, I would recommend you go to the search and put in the name, and you might find them. Even though they're not finished with the index right now, they have already published some of them in that index, and you'll be able to find them that way. So that's one option. The other one is to use let me take you through these, are these befolking registers. So you can see this PowerPoint presentation, and you can look at all of these people as they move in different addresses over time. So it gives you an idea. You can narrow in on an individual based on their date. So same sort of thing. You're going to get, you put in a name, Jacobus Bonzet. This is the befolking register between 74 and 93. Notice that there's a couple. These are Johannes Jacobus and Johann Jacobus. There's one born 1863, another one 1854, another one 1867, and 1891. They could be all related. Notice there's multiple dates, which means that each time they moved and they moved to a new location, they were registered at that place. And so when you then show the results, you'll see for each of the locations their birth date, where they were born, and their name, and then you can go and look at the actual image. So here's an example of an image, and you see here there's a Maria Christina Müller, excuse me, Johannes Jacobus Bonzet. So Müller is the Frau. On the right-hand side you can see Hoofd, meaning head, and then his son, Zoon, son, and then Dochter, and another son, and another Dochter, and then little hash marks meaning it's repeated. And so there you've got the whole family. Great way to find a lot of people. Now, these are not always correct, and I found lots of mistakes in them, but generally they are correct. So you can take this kind of date and say, okay, 10th of May, Jan Frederik was born the 10th of May, 1879. So then you can go in, if they're not you can't find them in the normal search because the index isn't completed yet. You can go to the Amsterdam birth records in Family Search, and you can zero in on that date, and you'll be able to find them. Now, some of the birth records are a little tricky because they will have two sets of them in one film. So there'll be one set that covers the same time period as the second set, and you might find them in the first set, and you might not, and you might find them in the second set. So you have to kind of, don't give up if you can't find them on that date. And I would always kind of err to checking a couple of days before and after. But again, Amsterdam's a big place, so you're going to have to go through a number of pages to find the individual. But this is a great way to get a clue on what the birth date is for that time of civil registration. And when the index gets done, which I hope will be at the end of this year or before the end of this year, and gets published, then you'll be able to just use the search feature on Family Search and find them that way. Long answer to short question. The other thing to be careful of is make sure that when you see somebody who's lived in multiple places, look at all of the kids in all the multiple places. And in this case, they lived in the same place twice. And so you'd think, well, I'm not going to look at that because they were already there. It turns out that there was a child who actually was alive at the second place that wasn't alive in the first place. And so it's a missing child. So just there are always little things that can happen, and you need to think of what are the different possibilities of finding somebody and be very precise and detailed. Another watch out was who's the mother. So this is one where I was trying to find somebody, and here's a father, a mother, and then the child. And I thought, oh, good, these are the kids. Well, actually, it turns out to be the second marriage of this fellow, and the wife. Whoops! If you zoom in, I think she's born like in 32. The child was born 39 or something like that. It's hard to see, but you're not going to have a child that soon. So it's just be careful, pay attention to detail, and then you can go back into the other record types and find them. So this is in the civil registration period, there are records called huwelijksbijlagen, which means marriage supplements. And in the marriage supplements, you'll be able to find the birth certificate or a copy of the birth information. You'll find the usually if they served in the military, there's a certificate for that which contains the birth date for the bridegroom. If the parents are there as witnesses, it'll have that. If they died, it'll have a death record for the parents. And if other witnesses were there, maybe the grandparents might have been there as witnesses, they would show up as witnesses. So you can end up with a huge amount of information for a particular family. And so this is an example. In that particular one we were looking a minute ago, it actually shows who the parents were, that it was not this other gal. It was Anna Hupperman was the wife. So gezinskaarten are similar. And here you see a family and you see the dates. They're a little harder to read, zoom in. But I look at it, again, it's a clue. It has mistakes, more mistakes than I've seen in other places. And but it can generally lead you to what you want to know. Other questions?
That is it for the questions that we had this period.
Great. Well, that was also the extra credit slides that we had on there. So as you can see here, this is the Shield of Amsterdam, which has heroic, determined, and merciful. And so I think people doing Dutch research are heroic. It's tough to work through some of those records. You have to be determined to do it, and you got to have some mercy for the people that did all the work over time. They made mistakes, but they did the best they could, and it'll be a tremendous experience as you search out your ancestors. And wish you all the luck in the world, and use the Family Search website. It's got a lot of great tools on it as well to help you do that. The wiki has got a lot of things that'll teach you some things about how to do this research too. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, John, for that presentation. I will be uploading this onto YouTube right after this presentation, and I will attach the link to that handout that John was talking about onto our YouTube page if you want to take a look at that later. Again, if you didn't get a chance to use or to answer the polls down at the bottom, we'd love to hear your feedback and maybe some different suggestions for polls that you want to do in the future. And thanks again for joining us today in our webinar.